Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Got a Case of Wanderlust podcast. I'm your host, Lydia, and today I'm joined by Fatima. Fatima is a solo female traveler passionate about local cultures, photography, and travel planning for Muslims, and she is currently filming from New Jersey. So I just want to welcome her to the show.
Thanks, Lydia. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, thank you for taking time out of your day. So, first, I just want to know what sparked your wanderlust.
Oh my God, I've always wanted to travel ever since I was a kid. I was a big reader, and so just reading about all these places made me want to go everywhere. But I never really thought it was possible for me because my family didn't travel much when I was young until I got to college. And then I spent a summer abroad, and after that, it was a wrap. I just had to go everywhere.
I could totally relate. I have the same experience growing up. I think like you get just antsy to explore if you have that in you and you maybe didn't have that as a child. So, yes, 100%. And then what was your first? I'm curious to know as a solo traveler, what was your first solo trip like and maybe some insights you gained from that trip?
That's interesting. My first traveling solo was the summer I spent abroad. In college, I traveled to Indonesia. But once I was in Indonesia, I met up with a group of students who were from my university. And so I don't know if that specifically counts, but my first solo trip that was just me embarking on my own adventures was in Spain in 2019. And so I had just left some friends in Italy and then I was like, all right, I'm going to spend the next week alone in Spain, city hopping. So I started in Madrid and then I went to the south of Spain to Sevilla and just kind of explored the area around there. And it was terrifying. It was nerve wracking. I was like, if I die, nobody will know. But it was also very freeing because I wasn't constrained to anyone else's itineraries. And so if I decided to be spontaneous and go explore someplace on a whim, I could totally do that. And so that was amazing.
Yes. And will you have any advice for someone going on their first trip, like something you wish you knew beforehand?
Oh my God, I have so much advice. I feel like that is a super general question. I don't know, it depends on like what kind of advice you're looking for. Are you trying to be safe? You know, safety is a big concern, especially for women who are traveling solo. I would definitely recommend some people share their location at all times. I do sometimes. But I'd also recommend just knowing your limits. I think both physically and in terms of what you're capable of. So for me, sometimes I want to climb this mountain, but I can't because physically I am unable to do that. And if if something happens to me, an emergency halfway up a mountain, who am I going to call? I know no one. And then just also being very aware of your surroundings. You know, you got to really weigh the risks. Do I want to go walking around the city at night? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, just knowing yourself and I think would you say that comes with experience or like should you know that before taking a first solo trip?
No, I think it definitely comes with experience. I grew up in northern Jersey, and so I did spend a lot of my time when I was a teenager going to the city, taking public transit. And by the city, I mean New York City. I often say the city, and people are like, well, which city are you talking about?
Like
But
the
any
city.
major city,
The
yes,
city.
yes. When you're from New Jersey or northern Jersey, the city refers to New York City. But I went to college near Philadelphia. And so in the suburbs of Philly, when you say, oh, I'm going to the city, they're talking about going to Philly. But if you're close to any major city, the easiest way to gain experience in how to be aware of your surroundings is by taking public transit and going into the city and walking around and testing your comforts at home or a place close to home, and then testing it in another city or country.
That's really good advice. Just starting small, starting with where you're more familiar with. It's a great starting point for a more bigger solo trip.
Yeah, because there are definitely times where I've missed my train or, I'm in a bit of a sketchy situation when I was young. And so it's really easy to be like, call my dad and be like, hey, I missed my train. Can you come pick me up? So, yeah.
Yeah, so relatable. My closest city is Chicago, so there's so many times where I was like rushing to get the last train. So yeah, yeah, totally get that. And then your second travel specialty is traveling as someone that practices Islam. So can you describe how traveling as a Muslim woman may look different than non-Muslim women? So like, are there extra things you have to account for or plan for?
Absolutely. The first was TSA. So, traveling as a Muslim woman, you're like, all right, I'm going to get randomly selected and skew everybody's statistics. That has happened less since I got TSA pre-check, I will say. But traveling as a Muslim woman is not easy. There are some places, some countries where you can be the first Muslim woman people have ever seen. And then I'm also American, born and raised in America, which tends to confuse people a lot because they envision Americans as only white. And so when they look at me, they're like, well, you're not American. I've had people try and convince me that I'm not American. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to bat for America, but I have an American passport. So, trying to convince an agent that I truly am American, it can get a little dicey. But traveling as a Muslim woman, as many drawbacks as there are also some benefits and advantages. I remember I was in, where was I? Pisa, Italy, and I was just walking through. They have like a vendor's market, and this guy sees me and he comes up to me and he starts talking to me in Bangla, which is a language that I do not speak. However, I do have many Bengali friends. And so I had to tell him, I'm like, hey, I don't speak the language. And so he switches to English and he goes, oh, okay, no worries, come, I'll give you many discounts. And it was completely random, but he was like, one Muslim to another, let me help you out as best I can. And that's an experience I've had in a couple of different places. Most of my experiences when people come up to me and start talking to me in their languages are more funny and amusing and
Okay.
beneficial than anything else because almost every country I've visited south of the equator, everybody assumes that I'm from that country. So when I was in Indonesia or Malaysia or even Turkey, people come up to me and they talk to me in the native language and I have to be like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm not from here. But then they're confused, but then they're excited to like learn where am I from. So it's interesting. I like it though. I think it's fun.
Okay, well that's good to hear. Where was like somewhere you traveled to that you can remember was particularly that you had particularly interesting experiences as a Muslim woman?
I think Indonesia was one of the best. So I spent 3 months in Indonesia and we mostly stayed in Yogyakarta, which is a pretty big university city, but we did travel to smaller villages and things like that because I was with a university group. And it was my first time being in a Muslim country, Muslim majority country. And so to be in a place where almost everyone around you is practicing the same religion, and so everything has been catered to the people of that religion. Like Islam is a lifestyle. It's not just we go to the mosque once a week. It's everything we do, everything we eat, everything we wear. It's all catered to this lifestyle. And so being in Indonesia, I could go out and eat anywhere I wanted because all of the food is halal. And I could go pray anytime I needed because there's a mosque on every corner. And so to me, that was completely mind blowing. And I also, while I was in Indonesia, Ramadan, which is a holy month for Muslims, happened to fall in that time that I spent there. And so this was my first Ramadan away from my family. So it was a bit of a homesickness, but it was also super cool to see how they changed the country for Ramadan to accommodate for fasting all day and then to celebrate Eid. They had huge parades in the street and each mosque had their own floats and the kids were all dressed up handing out roses to people in the street. It was amazing. And so that definitely had the biggest impact on me as a Muslim. And now every time I travel, I try to find a mosque in every city I go to. So it's pretty cool.
And then, how particularly difficult is it to find mosques, like, depending on where you travel to, or to find halal food? Is it on a scale of 1 to 10? Like, how big of a challenge is it?
That definitely depends on which country you're going to, but I'd say maybe a five. Finding a mosque can be pretty easy because some mosques are just like very small, hole in the wall operations. But finding halal food, oof, that can be a little bit more dicey. Just because, and then there are also levels to it. Some places will serve halal chicken only, and nothing else on the menu will be halal. And to me, that's okay. But some people have different levels of observation when it comes to halal food. And so it really depends on like what level of religiosity, I suppose, you observe. But for me, if I can't find halal food, seafood or vegetarian food is my next best bet.
Okay. And then, would you say, like, the best destinations you've traveled to have been because they were more catering to your religion, or like how big of a factor does your religion play into your experiences traveling?
I would say not a big factor at all. Honestly, I do love to find mosques and halal food when I travel. However, it's not usually my primary purpose of traveling. When I was in Indonesia and Malaysia, that was a primary purpose. But all of the other countries I've been to, it's been I want to seek out a mosque to see what the local culture is like. So, for example, when I was in Vietnam, yeah, Vietnam, I went to a mosque in Ho Chi Minh, and most of the congregation were immigrants from Malaysia and Indonesia. So on the one hand, I did feel at home because they were speaking a language that I could understand. But on the other hand, they weren't that many Vietnamese people. So it was like I wasn't really getting a taste for the local culture by going to the mosque. I mean, it was still a cool experience, but that wasn't my primary purpose. And so I don't exactly travel with the intention to go to every mosque or go to every Muslim country, although I would love to visit more Muslim majority countries. And so I wouldn't say that it factors very high up on my list.
Okay. Do you typically travel solo, or have you ever traveled with other friends that are also Muslim?
Oh, Muslim friends? I don't think I've really traveled with Muslim friends aside from short road trips here and there, like within my vicinity. I don't think I've really traveled with anybody else who was Muslim. I've traveled with non Muslim friends from college, and that was pretty cool, especially when I was first starting out. But I think over the last 10 years, the majority of my travels have been solo traveling. And I do like it because, as I said, it is very freeing, but it can get lonely for sure. But I think solo travel teaches you so much about yourself and what you're capable of that I really wouldn't have it any other way. But I did recently go on my first group trip, which was interesting. And so it was me meeting up with about 30 other folks that I had never met before, and our sole purpose was scuba diving. So it was a lot of like minded people. And it really showed me that group trips can be a very awesome experience as well.
Okay, and where was that?
Belize. I
Ooh,
went and got scuba diving certified in Belize.
oh my gosh, that's so fun.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I was very excited for that. And then the person who led the trip, she goes by the handle Black Girl Blue World on Instagram. She's amazing, Gabby. And so I'm actually doing another trip with her in a couple of months to get an advanced certification.
Wow, okay. And is this something you've always wanted to do, or is this just something you were like, let's go for it?
So I had never thought about scuba diving. I mean, there's so many things in this world that we can do that feel a little inaccessible. For example, skydiving was one of them for me, and then rock climbing was another. I don't see brown women, I don't see Muslim women rock climbing or skydiving. And so, but it seems really interesting. And so I decided to do them both. And then scuba diving was in the similar vein. It was, I don't see Muslim women scuba diving. And I was like, well, why not try it? So I did a Discover course, a Discover dive rather, when I was in Aruba earlier this year, and I loved it. I thought it was great. And so I was like, all right, so the next step is to go get certified. And then I found Gabby online, and I was like, wow, she's amazing, and she leads these trips for people. So I linked up with her, and I just decided to take the plunge. And as the time grew closer and closer to the trip, I freaked out just a little bit, because I was going to go underneath the water with only an oxygen tank strapped to my back. What was I thinking? It turned out to be the most amazing experience of my life. Like one of my top three life-changing trips, I would say.
Wow. And what about that was so life-changing? Can you describe your emotions going into it?
Well, for one, there's the feeling of loss of control. So I'm a person who very much loves to be in control at all times. And when you're solo traveling, you are in control. However, when you're scuba diving, your control relies entirely on you and your dive partner. And well, in this case, because I was being certified, my instructor as well. And so I really had to put a lot of trust in my equipment and my dive instructor and God. Every single time, right before I jumped off the boat, I'm like sending up a quick prayer, like, okay, God, you got my back. Like, please don't let me die. Because if I do, my mother, I'll never hear the end of it. And so it was very life changing in that you have to shift your mentality. And so you're like, okay, I'm doing this. I have to stay extremely focused on what I'm doing. And then I have to remember, why am I doing this? Like, what is the purpose? Because I'm not a marine biologist or some sort of conservationist who's going down there for work. I was going down there purely for pleasure and joy. And so it's like, well, why does this bring me pleasure and how? And what purpose is it serving in the larger grand scheme of my life? And I think one day maybe I'd love to like volunteer underwater. I think that's the thing. But for now, it was just being underneath the water. The entire world quiets down, and all of a sudden you're looking around and you're like, "Wow, like this is amazing." As much as there is to see on this earth, there's so much to see under the water. And seeing it up close and personal is completely different from viewing it on your phone or on a TV screen.
Wow, that sounds like such a beautiful life experience that you got to have.
Yeah. And I mean, and there's also the whole part about how I've never seen hijabis diving underwater. I would love to see more hijabis diving. I'm sure they're out there. I just don't know about them.
Yes, more representation of minorities like on screen for sure. Like Hollywood needs to step up its game. Even though it needs to step it up way more for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
And then you are also passionate about photography. So, what are just some of your favorite things to photograph?
I am mostly landscape or travel photography. Like I will shoot pretty much anything. I love public transit, which sounds so weird, but every time I go to a new city, I love to take the bus or the train or the subway and just kind of see how people design their cities. And I really love shooting places of worship and just anything that really catches my eye. So I'm not really a portrait photographer though, although for a few close select friends, I have done like weddings and wedding events.
Ooh, okay. Well, I feel like you're in like, one of the best locations in the world for photography, which is access to New York City. Is there a particular neighborhood you love going to and shooting?
In the city, I don't, actually, maybe Soho. I love shooting street art. So every city I go to, I try to find street art. I actually did my senior thesis in college about political messages in street art in Indonesia. So ever since then, it's kind of become a thing for me. And not just murals that have been carefully crafted and painted, but also just like graffiti and tagging, things like that. Like people would normally consider that desecration of public property or private property. And I look at that and I see art. And so I think Soho has a lot of great street art.
Mm. Huh, that's something I never paid close attention to in that neighborhood, but I will now.
Yeah. If you have the chance, it's like Soho, NoHo in that area. There's Freeman's Alley. It's just, it is what it says, an alley you walk down, but it's covered in murals and graffiti and street art, every inch of it, and it's constantly changing. So, and every time you go, like a month apart, you'll find something new.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, I'm definitely going to explore now. And then just to wrap up some rapid fire questions, what is one of your dream destinations?
Right now, I'd like to go scuba diving at Raja Ampat in Indonesia.
Ooh, I bet it's gonna be a lot cheaper than Belize, I'm assuming.
I'm not sure. My next dive is in Mexico, and that is a lot cheaper than Belize. It's about half the cost. So, but it really is what you make it.
Right. And okay, I know this is a rapid fire, but just a follow up, how do you find your scuba diving trips? What are your like things to look for?
Well, anytime I travel in general, cost is definitely a factor. I usually see where I can find cheap flights first and then look at hotels or accommodations. And after that, I consider, well, what can I do in this city? But it usually comes down to the flights first. However, with diving, you want to go with friends or with a group. And so I've been just in a group chat with my friends, and we're just like, all right, well, this person wants to go diving in this location and this location. So who has the time and who wants to go, really?
Okay. So just finding the community you want to be a part of.
Yeah, there's some great dive communities. Like in Florida, they have the Unicorns of Diving. They're like caters towards Black folks who are diving and things like that. And Girls at Scuba for, more women-oriented trips.
Okay, super cool. I would love to try that one day.
I think you should. I think everybody should try scuba diving. I just got one of my friends to sign up for a certification course.
Oh,
So we're going to be diving in Mexico together.
oh my gosh, exciting. That's so cool.
Yeah.
And secondly, for the rapid fire questions, what is a memorable meal you've had when traveling?
Memorable meal. Um, hmm. I went to Korea 2 years ago and I was in Seoul and I really wanted to try some Korean food, like authentic Korean food, but I needed it to be halal because I wanted to try like something with meat. And so I found an authentic Korean halal restaurant. And I can't remember the name of the dish I ate. Wow, it's completely escaping my mind. But it was amazing. It was so good. And yeah, so I can't remember the exact name of the dish, but there was this restaurant in Seoul right near the mosque, and it was great.
Okay. Yeah, it's hard to remember the names of the dishes because they have typically the Korean names. It's hard to translate. And then lastly, what is a special place in your heart that you've been to?
Oh, a special place in my heart. Well, my family is from Guyana, and I haven't been back to Guyana in a long, long time since I was very little. But it definitely does hold a special place in my heart just because of my family history and everything that, my family lived there for many generations. And then I guess a second place would also be, I know I've talked about Indonesia a lot, but Indonesia was such a life-changing trip for me. And I spent a good chunk of time there. And so Yogyakarta, where we stayed, was definitely, it holds a special place in my heart. I'd love
Mm,
to go back and spend way more time there.
I hope you can too. I hope I can too as well. That's one of my dream destinations for sure.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it's amazing.
and then, of course, lastly, where can we find you on all the socials, Fatima?
I'm really only active on Instagram at the moment, but my Instagram handle is at Fatima underscore travel. And you might want to write that out in the description
Yeah,
because
yeah,
my name has lots of A's in it. So very atypical spelling.
yeah. I'll definitely leave that in the show notes. But thank you so much for your time today. It was really great spending time with you and learning about all your travel insight.
Thanks. And thank you, Lydia. This has been fun. I love traveling. I feel like I talk about it all the time, but I have so much more to say all the time. So this has been awesome.
Thank you so much for listening to the Gotta Case One of Us podcast. Again, my name is Lydia, and you can find me on social media in the About section of this podcast. Please rate and review if you found value or insight from this, and I hope to see you in the next episode.